Hello, everyone. Welcome to DEI, a podcast dedicated to discussing and raising awareness on the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we're thrilled today to have Kristina Aleksander with us. Ms. Alexander currently serves as the communications director for Congressman Don Davis. She has a rich background in government administration, particularly in communications. Ms. Alexander previously worked with the U.S. House Office of Diversity and Inclusion, developing strategic communication strategies. She holds a master's degree in political management from the George Washington University and earlier worked for the Iowa Secretary of State before working at the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. Can you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, your identity, and anything you want to add on to this introduction?
Yeah, so I think what wasn't mentioned in there is that I'm actually originally from Belgrade, Serbia. So I came to the US as an international student. So that is kind of how I got into the whole DEI game. Um, it was really important for me, as an international student in a state like Iowa that is, predominantly white, predominantly American, to kind of create that safe space, not just for myself, but for other international students too. And then when I started working, when I was actually in charge of the hiring practices, and it really starts down at the bottom with hiring interns and giving that first opportunity to get your foot in the door. That's really where it was important for me to make sure that we follow very inclusive and diverse hiring practices, because diversity and inclusion is all good and well in theory up top, but it really does start with some grassroots efforts.
Can you elaborate on some of your experiences moving as an international student or challenges you faced?
Oh gosh. I mean, obviously, there's challenges just like, visa approvals and stuff like that, um, my American counterparts never really had to deal with. Like, for example, when I was an undergrad, we weren't allowed to work off campus. So international students are only allowed to work on campus. And that's also where like the pay disparity would come in, because our American counterparts could work off campus and make, this was back in 2013, so they would make like $10 or $11 an hour. But campuses usually pay just the federal minimum wage, so international students would only get paid $7.25 an hour, which is unfortunately still, the federal minimum wage, even though inflation is through the roof. Um, so I think that's kind of where that pay disparity starts. But then also when you graduate, there is a great number of employers that will not hire you, if there is even the slightest chance that they might have to sponsor you in the future. Um, I was lucky enough that I started my internship at the Iowa Secretary of State's office, and they didn't see a problem with that. I worked there while I was on my OPT, which is like the first work visa that you get after you graduate undergrad. But a solid number of my colleagues were not as lucky, and they actually had to return to their home countries. And it kind of, everyone wants this shot at the American dream, but eventually immigration services tell you, well, it's not as easy as you think.
Yeah, it's pretty relatable for me too, because I moved here from China 2 years ago, my freshman year, 2022. So there was a lot of adaptation that I had to go through and a lot of different processes. Like there's international students at my school cannot take the national merit exams and stuff like that. So definitely differences. Um,
Yeah.
how was your experience working at the Iowa Secretary of State, and what later led to your transition to work at the Office of Diversity and Inclusion?
Yeah, so at the Iowa Secretary, I'm sorry, can you repeat the first part of your question?
Like how was your experience working at the Iowa Secretary of State?
The experience was great. Originally, I went to undergrad for journalism and political science, and I really thought I would want to be a journalist. But again, that's one of those things where being international kind of plays the part of, I had a slight accent in the Midwest that is very much, a no-go for broadcast. If you have accent that's a bit unusual. So I actually ended up working at the Secretary of State's office. They gave me my first internship, and I was there throughout the 2016 and 2020 election cycles. So that was a really great way to kind of see the back end of elections, and not just kind of work on campaigns and work on getting the members and representatives elected, but to really kind of see how the sausage is made, so to say. And then when COVID hit, at the time, we had a baby and our family was growing, and we really wanted to kind of move to a place where we had a bigger support system. So we moved to the East Coast, and we've been here since 2021, and that's kind of how I ended up in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion.
Got it. After working at the Office of Diversity Inclusion and combining it with your own identity, what would you define as diversity, equity, and inclusion, or D&I? And why do you believe it is essential for society to kind of focus on it despite the recent backlashes?
So I think, you know, I think we all have very different ways of trying to define diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think for me specifically, having worked in that field for a few years, I have seen a lot of people try to try to make it a numbers game of you have this much of these people, so you need this much of these people, or you included these people, so we have to include these people. And I don't really think it's that. I think, especially when it comes to the House of Representatives, who we were mainly working with, it came with, the House of Representatives is in charge of making the laws for the entire country. And we want to make sure that the country feels represented. And we wanted to make sure that the staff, I'm so sorry. Can we just pause this for a second? I'm getting a call. Hey, John Michael, can I give you a call back in about 30 minutes?
It's okay, I'll
Yes.
cut that out, don't worry.
No, thank you. So, in at ODI, our motto was making sure that we put the people in the people's house and making sure that everyone feels represented in the House of Representatives. And there's a big part of that where when Americans go to the voting booth, they represent people. They elect people who think that would best represent them. But we also wanted to make sure that the staff is an accurate representation of the diversity of America. So we mainly focused on hiring and retaining diverse talent in the House.
How do you manage or achieve that? Like, how do you hire diverse talents, or what are some strategies that ODI has done?
So it really was a lot of, it always kind of was, if you want to work in politics, if you want to work in Congress, you have to come to DC.
Mm.
And when you come to DC, you kind of have to know someone, or someone needs to put in a good word for you, so you get a job. So we really tried to kind of be that someone, that
Mm.
we are the people who will, put in a good word for you, who will help you with your resume. Congress has, a very specific way, the way they want their resumes to look, the way the interviews are conducted. We have, not all jobs are public. Some of them just end up on various email lists. So just making sure that candidates and job seekers that are coming from some backgrounds where a career in Congress is not something that was ever even thought about, that they have access to those resources as maybe their counterparts that have been, more affluent, or that have been prepared for this type of career. So I think and this is actually so funny. When I was getting my start in Congress, my first job was with the Office of Majority Leader Hoyer. And I kind of came in and I didn't really know anyone in Congress. And I stumbled upon, I think it was an Instagram post from the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and they were holding a resume review workshop. And I was like, well, you know what? I haven't really reviewed my resume in 4 years because I had a very steady career for 4 years. And I attended a workshop. This was still during the pandemic, so it was over Zoom, and it was so, so helpful. So several months later, when my fellowship with the Office of Majority Leader Hoyer was over, and I was looking for a more permanent position, I saw that ODI was hiring a communications person, and I was like, this is my chance to give back, and kind of really gosh, what is that expression? Kind of put my uh put my money where my mouth is. That's what I would,
Right.
yeah.
Mhm. Oh, that's like a loop back. Very,
It
very
it it
interesting.
it really, really was. And throughout those 2 years at ODI, I got to talk to so many people that that come from these backgrounds where they didn't even know that they could work in Congress, that are
Mm.
immigrants, or their first generation college students. They spent their childhoods like translating to their parents, and they come from single mother households. They grew up on food stamps, stuff like that. So it really is like, it does fill me with pride that we were able to kind of put people like that wouldn't necessarily see themselves as congressional staff, to put them here and make sure that they feel welcomed, and like this is also their house.
Right. Would you say that's the main purpose of ODI, or would you say what is the general thing that ODI has been trying to achieve throughout the years?
Well, I will say, even though ODI doesn't exist anymore, that uh, purpose and all of that work still continues with the Office of the Chief Administrative Officer. So it won't be under, at least I believe, it won't be under the name of DEI, but that talent that was with ODI, our amazing staff, stayed with CAO, and I think the programs will continue, because I think I think it's a very bipartisan thing that we all understand that America is changing and the face of America is changing, and we have to embrace it. Because at the end of the day, if you want to keep getting elected and the demographics of your district is changing, you will have to find a way to appeal to the new demographic of your district.
Right.
And I think that, no matter what is said in the media by some congressional members, there is a level of understanding that they
Mhm.
will have to adapt with the times.
Right. And I know it's so heartbreaking. It was really heartbreaking to hear about the dissolvement of ODI as well when I first fumbled upon it on LinkedIn. What was it like the last few months before it shut down?
I would say it really wasn't the last few months. We kind of knew since January of 2023. So when the
Mm.
118th Congress started, we thought we would be the first ones on the chopping block. So just the fact that we managed to survive until March of 2024, until the second session of the 118th Congress, was really impressive, and it was fully unexpected. But there was just so much uncertainty. There's uncertainty among all congressional employees because end of the day, you work for a member who might not get elected in 2 years. So everyone here kind of works in a 2 year time span. But
Mm.
for us, it really was, I think especially that I left the office before it was dissolved. I left in March. But I would say since like November of 2023, it was, well, we might not be here next month. And then we were. And then it would again be, well, in 2 weeks, we might not have a job. So
Right.
and I just know the majority of the staff that I have spoken to that I am still friends with, we were all just so stressed because
Right.
it's not just your job, it's also, your health benefits, your retirement benefits. There's a lot of skin in the game. It's not just, a monthly paycheck. Congress
Mhm.
also pays for everyone's, student loans. So immediately that's also like your student loans would hit again. So it was a lot of uncertainty. So I know I've spoken to several staff members now that they are at the CAO. They actually feel that it's more institutionalized. So there's that level of uncertainty that has gone away because now they know that um like everything will be good and taken care of.
That's good. That there's more
Yeah,
security, but it's still
yeah,
really heartbreaking seeing like this entity that's helped so many people dissolve.
yeah, yeah.
How has ODI coped with the society backlashes against DEI in the past year? Because there's been a lot.
I think we really tried, at least from a communication standpoint, not to get into the culture wars. And we really did work with both sides. So we tried to stay out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So we took a policy of non-engagement.
Got it. Um, as the well, you personally, as like a person highly involved in like politics and the political realm, and who knows some of the behind the scenes, how do you perceive the divide on like the DEI concept in the US in recent years?
That is a very loaded question. I think, personally, just speaking for myself, um, as long as the policies are in place, as long as we can still continue the work, as long as we still make sure that everyone feels welcome and that this and that there really is room for everyone at every level, at every job that they want. I personally don't care what we call it. I
Right.
don't care if it's called diversity. I don't care if we call it representation. As long as we get the people in the positions that they want, and as long as we make sure that no one is discriminated against, that everyone feels kind of at peace, and that everyone is working in a safe environment where they are happy and they can thrive. I personally can care less if we can say that, it's a diverse workplace or not.
Right.
Honestly, I think there are probably people that, and I will just say this coming from the Midwest, there are people that work in highly diverse workplaces, but they will still scoff at the word diversity purely because it is perceived as this, coastal elite type of term. So they don't really have a problem with the people, with their coworkers, with the people that they live around. They just don't like the term because of all of these culture wars that we are in. Um,
Right.
so if it helps everyone to get rid of the word, let's just not use diversity anymore. Let's just call it representation. Let's call it something else.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, at the end of the day, language is really kind of a thing that changes and
Right.
evolves with the times. So, this is my second language. In Serbian, which is my native, we don't even have a word for diversity.
Mm-hmm.
We are still incredibly diverse. So it's
Right.
it's it's not the word uh that
It's
is that is the problem.
right. It's what people attach, the meaning people attach
Yeah.
to it. I think it's more like I think the concept's basically trying to build belongingness, but there's
Yeah.
been a lot of attacking on how it divides people, which is what the or not what the original purpose is.
Yeah.
Right. And
I think I will say for, the last 2 years, I have gone to a number of convenings that had, diversity in their name or in their mission statement or something like that. And they were extremely exclusionary.
mhm.
And I have personally never felt more discriminated against than at some of those diversity events. So I think, you know, we can have discrimination and exclusion everywhere, even if we say that it is,
Right.
safe,
Diverse.
like how some offices will say this is a safe space for everyone, and they will do all of the virtue signaling, and they will say all of the right words, but it won't actually be like that in practice. So
Mm.
you do you kind of get where I'm going
Yeah,
with?
I get it. I get it. I get where you're going. Yeah. Can you elaborate on like some of your experiences, maybe as your identity as a female and also like an immigrant moving here or like an international student, some experience of like feeling excluded or like in the workplace or even during your education?
I think, definitely going to like a small liberal arts college in Iowa. There was definitely, I think I definitely had one of the most diverse friend groups ever because I was, my best friend was from Beijing. My other
Oh.
best friend was from Lagos. So it was this incredibly diverse group of friends that we were from all 7 continents. Actually, no, we weren't because I had no Australian friends in there. But we were from the majority of continents. Um, but then actually, when you look at it, we were not really friends with any American students.
Mm.
And it was just because our, cultural backgrounds, our cultural experience, our lived-in experiences didn't really match. I grew up in a town of 2 million people, and I would spend my summers in Greece, or we would go to Egypt. I spent a summer backpacking with my mom through Europe. It wasn't really the same type of high school experience that someone from a smaller town in Iowa could relate to. So there was a lot of, just the international kids wouldn't understand the American kids, and the American kids would think that we were kind of snobby, which we were, but we were in our teens. We didn't know better. Um, but it was I think there was just a lot of discrimination, but also I think college is just such a hard time for everyone, that everyone kind of copes with it differently, and everyone, it really is a time when you learn how to grow up and how to deal with a lot of stuff. And unfortunately, discrimination is one of those things. I personally really didn't have American friends until I started working at the Secretary of State's office, where I worked exclusively with Americans, and they were some of the nicest, kindest people I knew. Um, when um, when they found out that my work visa was expiring, they were so nice. They were so supportive. When I had my baby, they threw me a baby shower because I didn't really have anyone else in the area. So when you really get to know the people, there are kind people from
Everywhere.
around, from every background. And I
Right.
don't think we should, I don't want to use the word segregate, but I don't think we should put ourselves in camps of people who are similar to us just because we are scared of, what someone from a different ethnic background would say about us, or someone from a different religious or racial background would think about us. My best friend right now is from Haiti. And we actually found out that me growing up in Serbia and her growing up in Haiti, we had pretty much the exact same childhood,
Oh, really?
different sides of the world.
Hmm.
So I think it's really when you start having those conversations with people that are not like you, if you're not afraid to have those conversations, you actually find out you have a lot of stuff in common.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody, 99% is the same.
Yeah.
I see that you like transitioned to your new job at as the communications director of Congressman at Honorable Don Davis's like office. How's the transition going, or are there any correlations with your last job?
Um, the transition has been a bit hectic. I actually started here on State of the Union week. And we transitioned from a fairly large communications department to just me. But luckily now we have another communication staffer who works here, so it really is a lot easier. But you know, working in Congress is it's a lot of long days, and Congressman Davis is a freshman from a frontline district, so there's no room for error. Um, so yeah, it's a lot of really, really long days.
I see. Yeah, very tiring.
It is. It is. We actually we were just in the district. We got back yesterday at midnight. And we're
Wow.
about to go into, I think, 5 weeks of session. Um, so it's, you know what, it's a lot, but like, for example, I don't have anyone in North Carolina. Um, this is the
Mm.
first time that I got to go and meet the people in the district. And the district is very different to how I grew up, but it is very similar to Iowa.
Mm.
So it really is that, you know, even in America, it doesn't really matter, you know, what part of America you're in, because a rural, underdeveloped community is very similar, both in the South and in the
The
Midwest.
North. Yeah.
They still, you know, they still deal with some of the same issues. So yeah, no, getting to meet people in our district was really great because yeah, again, so many similarities.
Sounds like tiring, but very exciting work.
It is, you know what, I would definitely recommend to, you know, you're in high school now, right?
Mhm.
Every high schooler, every college kid, like come intern in Congress, just figure out if, you know, it is for you, because a lot of people don't even consider it as an option. And then you come here and you just fall in love with it and you work 14-hour days, but it's something that kind of fulfills you and
Mm.
you're making a difference. You're actively making a difference in people's lives. And it's really, really heartwarming. And it sounds like such a cliche, but it's really nice.
First of all, like as your majors as like a communications director or after working at ODI and looking at so many diverse perspectives and different people, like meeting different people from all places, do you have any suggestions for Gen Zs or Gen Alphas that's going to become the workers of the next generation?
I think um I will say when so I just recently graduated grad school from GW. So a lot of my friends are Gen Z. They're kind of like in their mid-20s. Um and it's so interesting because especially with kind of the more progressive side, all of my friends are extremely progressive. I love them. I'm a progressive too. We can sometimes turn our noses and be very exclusionary of you know, people that we think are less educated than us,
Right.
or people that, you know, come from rural neighborhoods or that come from small towns or that have grown up differently than us. So I think, and again, I'm going to be that millennial that harps on Gen Z, unfortunately. But I think my generation is a bit to blame about this too. We can go on and on about diversity and inclusion and how important it is, but then we meet someone with, you know, that slight Southern twang, or someone who is, you know, very religious and goes to church on Sunday and goes to Bible study on Wednesdays, and like, oh my God, that person's so religious that like that's kind of gross, isn't it? You know,
Right.
like we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't, promote diversity and inclusion, but then like, oh my God, this person's from
Right.
Texas. That is the worst thing ever. But we do that. Like I will say I'm guilty of
Right.
doing that sometimes too. My partner is from the South, and the first time I heard him talk, I was like, he's probably really uneducated because I've only heard people from the South and they're like very uneducated. And then I found out he went to like law school at Syracuse and he's like incredibly smart. So I think we are very guilty of trying to place people in buckets because of
Mhm.
the way they look, because of the way they talk, what God they pray to or no God. Um, and just we can't have diversity and inclusion without tolerance.
Right.
I don't think our tolerance is quite there yet as a nation and just as, yeah, as a nation, I don't think we're very tolerant.
Yeah.
That is
I
definitely something we need to work on.
I think so too. I think exclusion happens everywhere, and I don't think we truly have been really working on that. Um, like we haven't really like crossed the line between like really tolerating all people. That was
Yeah.
really inspiring actually, because I think you really summed it up well.
I just think, you know, we need to be more honest with ourselves. And I think this is, coming from Eastern Europe, I grew up with like this very harsh honesty of
Mhm.
people will just tell you like it is, and you kind of have to accept it. And I have found out that Americans are more mild-mannered, and you really have to be diplomatic about your words. You can just tell them exactly what you think, even though sometimes I want to. But in that same vein, I think we all need to be more honest with ourselves. Um, that we can't just virtue signal. We can't put those yard signs of like, in this house we believe in science and
Right.
that Black Lives Matter, and I have gone into some of those houses and they will say the most racist, bigoted stuff
Mm,
inside the house. And then they will have a yard sign that virtue signals to
right.
everyone on the outside. And I think a lot of people do that.
Yes.
And I'm just like, look, if you're gonna be racist, just be openly racist. Let's just get it all out in the open.
Right.
Like, if you don't like I'm an immigrant, just say it to my face. Don't say it behind my back. Let's
Hmm.
let's talk it out because I think unless we have that open dialogue where, you have a problem with immigrants. Tell me what the problem is. Let's figure out if we can get past that. Like,
Right. I feel like it's more we have to talk things out in the open, get through things, and actually work on like becoming a community. Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you so much for being here, though. It's a pleasure having you and listening to some of your experiences.
Yeah.
And that concludes today's episode on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Before we sign off, thank you for listening to Don't Erase My Identity. Stay tuned for next week's episode.